The Nauvoo Music and Concert Hall, a prelude to the Exodus. An article by Daryl Babbage. During a time when early Latter-day Saints were busily working to erect a temple, Joseph Smith directed them to begin work on another building 1 block away, a music hall. In this article, Daryl Babbage recounts the history of this structure that affirmed the importance of music and the arts for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A note from the author. When I was a master's student at BYU, I enjoyed the classes I took as a music major, but what really grabbed my attention were the church history classes I elected to take. My interest in church history grew from that moment on, and when I joined the faculty in the School of Music at BYU a few years later, I was drawn to find a research project to align with my love of music and church history. It didn't take me long. I kept coming across brief journal entries about a music or concert hall in Nauvoo. This music hall was not the same building as the Masonic Hall, later known as the Cultural Hall, and so my curiosity got the better of me. This was a specifically designated building for music making, and I was compelled to find out more. I traveled to Nauvoo to do some research. I went to the visitor center looking for the miniature building of the concert hall on the day map, knowing it would be a block north of the temple. To my amazement, there was no indication of it ever being there. This then became my quest, to put this wonderful concertizing hall back on the map. That Joseph Smith chose an elevated plot of land a block north of the temple for the use of vocal and instrumental music intrigued me. I would like to think that his vision of this building, which he never saw completed, was a pinnacle tribute to his love of music.
On many an evening in 1845, anyone near the corner of Woodruff and Young Streets in Nauvoo, Illinois, would have heard the music coming from the newly constructed Music and Concert Hall. See Figure 1. The following year, the music making abruptly stopped as thousands of Nauvoo residents fled from mob violence, abandoned the city, and began their journey westward to the Great Salt Lake. Today, on the same corner, is an empty, grassy area where children often play. This article seeks to tell the history of the Nauvoo Music and Concert Hall. This hall points to the lifeblood of music and community in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, although the hall was used for only a brief time. The people of Nauvoo placed an emphasis on music that was unusual for a frontier town. They also set a standard of providing buildings for cultural refinement that continues among the saints today. Joseph Smith's vision for a music hall. Wednesday, April 19, 1843, was a busy day for the prophet Joseph Smith. He attended court hearings for most of the day, and then met with several members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles at the Red Brick Store on Water Street. Specific assignments to quorum members focusing on the construction of the temple and the Nauvoo house were carefully orchestrated. There had been enough on his mind that day, but there was one more item of business to be completed. In the evening, he made his way to Woodruff and Young Streets, 1 block north of the temple, and designated Lot 4, Block 67, for a music hall. Finding a place dedicated to concertizing, it seems, was a high priority for the prophet. His vision for the city included other buildings such as the 70s Hall and the Masonic Hall, designed for use by specific groups, but the music hall was dedicated to musical performances. That he designated a building for the celebration of music to be so near to the temple gave the music hall an elevated status. The temple was being built on the bluff, and the 70s Hall and Masonic Hall were downhill in the lower part of the city. Joseph's vision of a hall for musical performances and its lofty position of accompanying the temple site was high praise indeed for the arts and for community gathering. Joseph also desired a hall that would seat more people than the 70s Hall or the Masonic Hall could. Little, if any, work on the project was undertaken in 1843, and sadly, Joseph died before the music hall was constructed. But 4 months after his martyrdom in June 1844, his desire for music to resound from the designated edifice at last began to be realized. By October 1844, construction of the hall was underway. despite the uncertain future of the saints in the city. On October 30th, the Nauvoo Neighbor published a letter extolling the urgency and pride that one should take in completing an edifice of this importance, and asking residents to contribute to the construction cost by buying shares. See Figure 2. Quote, "Our citizens cannot sufficiently appreciate the effects that we are now making to finish one of the finest monuments of our city. Our choir, numbering over 100 members, whose zeal can only be made manifest by the difficult circumstances under which they are laboring, by singing in the open air, and that too frequently in windy weather, that we have an imperfect idea of the thrilling delight such a body of music played under different circumstances would produce. But, Mr. Editor, taking it as it is, I would ask, where are we to go for music if we do not find it in Nauvoo? I will boldly answer, nowhere. I am informed that the shares in the concert hall are not all at present taken up. Something considerable yet remains to be done to complete that hall. I would say let still a more glorious spirit of enterprise be made in finishing of that building. A poor man can put $5 in that hall without grumbling, aye, and pay for it too as well as the rich man, because his hands are his fortune. I will close this epistle by urging the necessity of immediately finishing the hall, because it is being built for the most benevolent purpose. Our places of worship are as yet few and small. I am informed that the concert hall will be used for preaching during the winter. Get this hall completed, so that rising generations in coming time will look upon you as the founders of the greatest city in the West, and the greatest benefactors of the age in which you lived." Close quote. The hall was to become the hub of all musical activity in Nauvoo, and it was to be competitive with other music halls in the nation. An acoustically engineered music hall was to be an admirable prospect indeed, and it was fitting since Nauvoo's population was larger than Chicago's, and there was an ever-increasing influx of converts with musical talent. The saints recognized that they might have to leave their city, but continued to build despite that fear. The music hall was to be the oasis of Nauvoo's cultural entertainment, whereas the temple would be Nauvoo's spiritual oasis. Sadly, both were utilized by the saints for a very short time. Funding and using the unfinished hall. Raising funds was imperative for this realization, and so finding money for the building was an ongoing crusade for the Nauvoo Music Association, which sold capital stock at $2.50 a share. It would eventually cost nearly $1,000 to complete the hall. Building the music hall was a lower priority than building the temple, which for the saints was the ultimate goal of their spiritual fulfillment. The font and some of the rooms of the temple were completed in the fall of 1844. Money for the music hall was eventually raised despite general poverty among the saints. Along with monetary donations, saints sacrificed their time to erect the music hall, though not as much as was sacrificed for the temple. With the winter of 1844 setting in, the unfinished music hall soon became a place used not only for musical events, but for education and gospel preaching. The new hall was now to be used as a school, among other things, and what greater place than under the shadow of the temple, the house of the Lord. Howard Corey, see Figure 3, who was at one time a secretary to the prophet Joseph, rented the unfinished hall in the fall of 1844. He wrote that he procured the music hall for a schoolroom. It was large enough to accommodate 150 students, and I succeeded in filling the room, or nearly so. In running the school, I had my wife's assistance. How the building was utilized for the school is difficult to tell, since the music hall would eventually accommodate an audience over 4 times that size. It seems that construction was still underway during the late months of 1844, but there must have been some consternation over having 100 young students running around the unfinished hall. In December, although the dedication of the hall was a few months away, the building was taking shape, and rehearsals for upcoming events were already being held there. Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, and Newell K. Whitney visited the hall a week before Christmas, attending the practice of music at the concert hall in the evening. As the new year began, more meetings were being held in the hall. Brigham Young and Newell K. Whitney met there with members of the Aaronic priesthood on Friday, January 10, 1845. Newell recommended that the bishops establish in their respective wards the manufacturing of palm leaf and straw hats, willow baskets, and other business that children are capable of learning, that they may be raised to industrious habit. On January 24th, Brigham Young's recorder noted, "The plasters finished plastering the concert hall. This building is 30 feet by 50 and 11 feet high. The ceiling is arched and has sounding jars. It has been built amidst difficulty and discouragement in consequence of poverty, and has cost nearly $1,000. Much of the burden has laid on the trustees, Stephen H. Goddard, William F. Cahoon, and William Clayton." Traditionally, sounding jars were cylinders embedded into the walls to enhance the acoustics of a room by amplifying and reverberating sounds. See Figure 4. This was a feature that rivaled any building in Illinois at that time. Speakers and musicians alike certainly benefited from the acoustics provided by the sounding jars. There were at least 2 other meetings held during these weeks before the dedication. Heber C. Kimball spoke on increase and expansion. Orson Pratt advanced an idea pertaining to the magnitude of the planetary system, and Heber Kimball and Patriarch John Smith preached that if the saints would adhere to counsel, they should grow right into the millennium. The music hall also opened up for a city election as well as a funeral service. Dedication of the music hall, March 3rd through 5th, 1845. The dedication of the music hall was finally announced in the Nauvoo Neighbor on February 26, 1845. Grand concert of vocal and instrumental music. The Nauvoo Choir and Band proposed giving a concert of vocal and instrumental music in the Nauvoo Concert Hall as a dedication of said hall to take place on Monday and Tuesday evenings, the 3rd and 4th of March, and longer if necessary. The doors will be opened at 6 o'clock, and the performance to commence at 6:30 precisely. Although the concerts were free, patrons were encouraged to make a liberal donation. The money was to cover the cost of lighting the hall and to purchase some other articles necessary to finish the hall in good style, for the saints wanted the hall to be of superior quality. The anticipation that a 3rd performance might be needed to fill the demand was correct. A concert was added on March 5th, and even then people were turned away. On Monday, March 3rd, the music hall opened its doors for the first time as the official hall for musical concertizing. The dedicatory concert began at 6:30 p.m. There were 10 selections by the choir, 7 selections by the band, a solo by celebrated singer John Kay, see Figure 5, and a string trio. The choir consisted of 27 female and 18 male singers. Of significance were 2 new musical pieces that were premiered at these concerts. John Taylor had written a song called "The Seer" about his martyred friend and prophet, and Parley P. Pratt had also written a dedicatory hymn called "Sacred to Truth This Hall Shall Be," which was performed by the band and choir at the beginning of each dedicatory concert. Quote, "Truth is our theme, our joy, our song. How sweet its numbers flow. All music's charms to truth belong. To truth ourselves we owe. 'Twas truth that brought us from afar. 'Twas truth that placed us here. Union and truth without a jar can halls and temples rear. 'Twas truth first formed our band and choir on Zion's western plains. 'Twas truth that tuned our earliest lyre in sweet harmonious strains. Sacred to truth this hall shall be, while earth and time remains, where the band and choir in harmony shall swell their sweetest strains. By truth our union is complete, our songs in concert rise, and by the power of truth we'll meet, to sing amid the skies. Hosanna to the Prince of Peace, his truth has made us free. All hail the day of full release, the earth's glad jubilee." Close quote. The programs also included Lamentation of Zion by William Clayton, sung by John Kay and Susan Devine, a glee sung by William Cahoon and Lady and Mrs. Bales, and Maid of Judah. Zena D. H. Jacobs attended on March 4th and noted that the concert was wonderful to tell. On Wednesday, Heber C. Kimball gave a sermon about music and the building up of Nauvoo. Quote, "Brethren and sisters, agreeable to Brother Goddard's request, I arise to address you for a short time. I hope the congregation will be as still as their crowded situation will allow. I am an admirer of music. I am fond of variety, and when I say this, I consider that I am not in the least stepping aside from the laws and character of the Creator. Look over this vast congregation, and you will be convinced that God is a God of variety. Here are near 1,000 persons before me, and my eyes do not rest upon any two persons who are alike in features, or the lineaments of countenance. Here are many different kinds of instruments, and a great number of tunes can be played, and a variety of sounds may be sounded from a variety of strings on an instrument, for instance the piano, whereby music may be varied to suit the different tastes and feelings of the mind, and thus can a sameness or monotony be avoided, and different interest be excited. There is an order in the kingdom of God. There is an order in the creations of God. There is an order in music, and there is an order and law adapted to the government, regulation, and creation of all things." Close quote. Heber C. Kimball, although waxing lyrical, seemed to have been stirred by the evening's music. A review by Lyman Littlefield of the third and final night of these concerts adds information on the structure of the building and gives us an idea of the proceedings of the evening. Quote, "The late concerts, which came off at the new music hall in this place on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights of last week, was attended with great interest on each evening. The music hall is a large and commodious brick building, suitable to convene some 700 or 800 persons. It is finished at the north end with a raised floor or platform, furnished with seats and desks for the accommodation of singers and musicians. On Wednesday evening, I was in attendance to see what music there was in Nauvoo. At sundown, the house was filled beyond convenience, and it was found impossible for more to enter. At dusk, the house was lighted with 3 chandeliers, which spread an ample light over the vast assembly, disclosing hundreds of happy and smiling faces, exhibiting the beautiful and intelligent faces of Nauvoo. The choir consisted of 27 female singers and 18 gentlemen. There were 12 of the band present." Close quote. Heber C. Kimball was voice for the dedicatory prayer after the band had performed, and the choir sang a piece called "Strike the Cymbal." What followed was a 4.5-hour concert of music and addresses delivered by Brigham Young and Kimball. Performer John Kay, see Figure 5, was a convert from England with a fine baritone voice. He worked in iron and brass, and was also a policeman in Nauvoo. He had a large personality and cheerful disposition. Joseph had often asked John to sing as entertainment for visitors who came to Nauvoo. Littlefield wrote of his performance at the inaugural concert, "Mr. Kay, as a singer, would do credit to any Eastern concert. His voice is full, soft, and well cultivated, and he varies it with harmony and skill." William Pitt, another English convert, with his accomplished band of instrumentalists, played 7 selections, and the choir sang 10 selections. Of the choir, Littlefield wrote, "The room was filled with intense and burning melody, the harmony of so many cultivated voices, all seemingly tuned to the high aspirations of sublimity, at once captivated the musical mind, and filled the ear with the refined tones of modulated music." Heber C. Kimball's address on this final night of concerts stirred the audience with a sermon on the divine order of music, to which he concluded, "This is the 3rd night that this hall has been filled to overflowing, and you may continue these concerts for 13 or 20 nights to come, and the same interest will be excited, and the hall will be as crowded every night with a new congregation as it is now." Of anecdotal interest is an article written in the Nauvoo Neighbor a few weeks later, where a disgruntled reviewer addressed the discomfort of sitting in an unventilated hall. Quote, "If public speakers do not wish to injure their lungs, they should be cautious about speaking in unventilated rooms or halls. When the music hall was dedicated, why did Brother Goddard and many others say on the third evening that the music and singing was better than it had been the 2 previous evenings? The reasons are obvious. On that evening, the upper part of the windows were taken out, which supplied the musicians and singers with pure air. The windows to the Masonic, 70s, and music halls should be so fixed that they can be dropped down from the top from 4 to 8 inches, which should always be done when they are filled with a congregation, though the weather might be as cold as Greenland. I hope those who have the care of these buildings, if they regard the health of this people, will immediately fix them so they can be properly ventilated." Close quote. The complaint seems somewhat pedantic, but it helps us get an idea of the setting of the concerts. Continued musical events and meetings, 1845. The following Saturday, no music was performed, but a ladies' meeting was held. The next Monday, there was a choir rehearsal at which Orson Spencer was asked by the choir director, Stephen H. Goddard, to speak about the education and edification of music. Some of the apostles were also to speak, but apparently did not turn up. In mid-March, there seems to have been a disturbance among the choir members, because Heber C. Kimball met with them for 2 nights in a row, the second night being accompanied by Brigham Young as backup. There is no indication of what the dispute was about, but Goddard, it seems, wanted to make sure there was harmony in the soul, as well as from the voice. The apostles also held a meeting there to ordain bishops for a bishop and deacon's guard, which was made of quorums of 12 deacons under the leadership of a bishop, to keep watch in all parts of the city. 4 weeks after the inaugural concert series, another series of concerts was announced. From the Nauvoo neighbor, great music was promised. There will be a 3-day concert, April 7th, 8th, and 9th, at the music hall. Our musicians and sweet singers will give a specimen of rich licks and expect a little rhino in return. For further particulars, see handbill, and for reality, step in and snatch a taste beyond the reach of art. It seems that there were now high expectations for these music marathons. Examining the handbill that advertised the event, see Figure 6, we can see that the program changed nightly. This was an adventurous undertaking. The choir was not so heavily featured this time, singing only once before each intermission, and accompanied by the band. 16 glees in total were performed throughout the 3-day event. These were unaccompanied vocal trios, or quartets, that harmonized to secular songs of the day. As well as playing overtures and grand marches with his band, William Pitt also played solo numbers on the flute and violin. There were a few vocal duets and solos, John Kay taking the spotlight. Hosea Stout attended all 3 evenings with his wife, Louisa, and on the first night wrote, "I went with her to a grand concert of vocal and instrumental music at the concert hall at 6:00 p.m. We were well entertained until about 11 o'clock and came home." The Nauvoo Neighbor published this review, quote, "Our concert. The concerts at the music hall last week were excellent. The compositions and music, most of which was the natural production of the city of Joseph, for so it is the intention to call Nauvoo, was first-rate, and does great credit to the genius and talent of the saints. It was made up of the sacred, sentimental, and comic, and done up to the very sense of the heart." Close quote. This series of concerts sets a different tone than the previous one. There were at least 3 more concerts later in the month, April 20th, 21st, and 22nd, although they were not advertised in the Nauvoo Neighbor. The hall became a hub of activity for other events throughout the next few months, as well as the continued use by the school. During the summer, the hall was also occupied from time to time by the Female Association for the Manufacturing of Straw Bonnets, Hats, and Straw Trimmings, in fulfillment of Bishop Newell K. Whitney's admonition a few months earlier that straw hats be made. To celebrate the 4th of July, another concert was held, in which the proceeds went to the Old Police. William Pitt's band, as well as John Kay's popular solo voice, were prominent features of the concert. Reportedly, another grand concert of vocal and instrumental music was held in the music hall at which the Nauvoo choir and band performed. The choir sang Strike the Cymbal, Heavenly Visions, Jerusalem, and the Dedication Hymn. Included were a violin trio, a grand slow march, and an overture. The hall used as a place of preparation for the Exodus. The heat of enemy conflict against the Saints grew to a fever pitch by the fall of 1845. Instead of being a place of concertizing, the hall was used as a place of refuge for Saints who had been living in the many settlements outside the city. The 70s had used the music hall for meetings, but were now forced to meet elsewhere so that the refugee Saints, along with their furniture, could be housed in the hall. Soon the hall joined the list of buildings that the Saints were hastily trying to sell. On October 31st, 1845, the 12 sent a letter to Catholic Bishop John B. Purcell in Cincinnati, Ohio, offering to sell the music hall with various other buildings if they wanted them. At the end of November 1845, at a Sunday meeting in the music hall, Thomas Bullock wrote, "The day was very cold, with thick ice on the river. At 11 a.m., the 70s met in the concert hall. Brigham Young met with the captains of the emigrating companies and gave them instruction to prepare themselves for the journey to the West. It was reported that 3,285 families had been organized into companies. 1,508 wagons were on hand, and 1,892 wagons were being built. The finality of knowing that they were to abandon their beloved city and its newly constructed buildings must have been devastating to them. By mid-December, there must have been some respite because the 70s resumed their meetings in the music hall. On December 6th, a meeting was held in the hall to discuss the exodus westward, and subsequent meetings were held there as Saints frantically tried to find the means to leave. These meetings held by the 70s continued until the exodus from Nauvoo. Pitt's Nauvoo brass band also kept minutes of their meetings, and their records indicate that they met in the music hall often. A record called A Book Containing the Minutes of Joseph's City Band existed at one point, but may no longer be extant. Horace Whitney, reporting in The Contributor, had access to it in 1880, and what he transcribes from some of its pages reveal a few more particulars, including the last 3 performances that the hall hosted. The transcribed minutes report that there would be a grand concert at the music hall on January 17, 1846. Interestingly, tickets were sold to pay off a debt for instruments that the band had purchased in St. Louis. The height of concern for most people at this point was to sell their homes and use all of their resources to purchase necessities for the journey west. But this pressing need did not deter crowds of people from attending the concert. The band minutes offer a glowing report of the proceedings and note how the money was also used for other purposes. The concert appears to have been a decided success. It was given 3 times, on the last occasion for the benefit of the temple hands, and each evening drew a crowded house. This concert series marked the end of Nauvoo's cultural spectacle at its very best, and what better way to celebrate than in the hall their beloved Joseph had planned. Although the future was precarious for everyone in attendance, this was their last chance to unify their souls in song and merriment. At each concert, 24 pieces were performed. The mood varied from the comical to the serious. It was a poignant moment when a vocal trio sang, "Satan, Spare the Saints," as the snow fell that final night. As the final chords were struck and final notes sung from within the music hall on January 19, 1846, attendees knew that they would not enjoy the luxury of listening to the Saints' musical best in the comfort of this hall anymore. The success of these music extravaganzas, which fulfilled Joseph Smith's vision for the hall, were short-lived. Within 2 weeks, the first group of Saints left Nauvoo. During the few short months that the hall was filled with music, it became a haven from the oppression the Saints felt. The building continued to be used for gatherings. The 25th Quorum of the 70s met in the music hall during the first few weeks of 1846, while hundreds were departing from Nauvoo daily. These gatherings included parties as well as sober meetings. On January 26th, they held a feast for themselves and their wives. On March 2nd, the 70s met again in the hall, where it was announced that those who had not yet received their endowments would receive them in the wilderness. A week later, on March 9th, knowing they were meeting for the last time, the 70s asked the Nauvoo Brass Band to play for them. The abandoned music hall. By April 1846, the hall was on the market to be sold. In a new local weekly paper, the Hancock Eagle, the music hall was advertised for sale. See Figure 7. It was eventually sold to the Methodist Episcopal Church for $310 in February 1847. A search through extant land and property records provides no indication that the hall was still standing by the end of 1848. It may be possible that the 1850 tornado that toppled most of the temple also damaged the music hall. Interestingly enough, a journal entry from George A. Smith in 1856, when he and Erastus Snow traveled through Nauvoo, mentions the music hall apparently still standing. Quote, "Went to Nauvoo, put up at the mansion. Elder Snow and myself walked the town in the dark and mourned over the desolation of Joseph City and the hard-hearted condition of his family. Slept in room and mansion, room dirty. Nauvoo looks desolate. The site is very handsome. The best buildings are standing mostly out of repair. The Mason Hall is dilapidated. 70 Hall and Concert Hall look the worse for wear. The mansion house was not kept in order, has not been cleaned up lately or repainted since Joseph Smith done it. The old temple looks sorry." Close quote. And in a letter to T.B.H. Stenhouse, Smith wrote, quote, "We also made a flying visit to Nauvoo, or the city of Joseph. I should judge that about 3/4 of the Mormon buildings had been torn down, removed, or destroyed. Many of the best buildings remaining show clearly the effects of 10 years' neglect. Although most of them are inhabited, few appear to be kept in repair. My mind imperceptibly drew a contrast between Nauvoo in its glory and Salt Lake City, and from looking at the Masonic Hall, 70s and concert halls, and arsenal, my conclusion was that Salt Lake City is so far ahead of Nauvoo that the latter could be better compared with Provo, more properly in its public buildings, machinery, etc., but not in population." Close quote. By 1976, the National Register of Historic Places listed the concert hall as no longer extant. We often recount the loss of the saints' homes and the pinnacle of their spiritual worship, the temple they had so painstakingly built. But they had also left behind the nucleus of their musical yearnings. Fortunately, just as they could make temporary homes and perform religious rituals out on the plains, they could also create music with their unified voices and instruments. The music was a lifeline for the saints, and was the something they could carry with them that could not be spoiled. This legacy has been handed down, and today we obtain the same response as we unify our voices and hearts to lift us spiritually and socially to a higher plane.
About the author. Daryl Babbage was a member of the BYU Music School faculty from 2006 to 2019, and will begin teaching voice as a faculty member at the Juilliard School in New York City in fall 2019. He will also teach at the Lindemann Young Artist Development Program at the Metropolitan Opera. He earned a bachelor's in vocal performance at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, United Kingdom, a master's at Brigham Young University, and a professional degree at the Manhattan School of Music. He has performed at the Metropolitan Opera and as a soloist at Carnegie Hall, and has sung throughout Europe, Asia, and America. Students he taught at BYU and privately now sing at opera houses throughout the world and record for major labels. This is an audio production of BYU Studies, read for you by Dylan Wright and Sydney Simpson. BYU Studies publishes scholarship informed by the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information and access to articles, essays, and more, visit byustudies.byu.edu.